In the last episode, the three of them found a spot to awaken new talents, and Lin's talent got a nice upgrade from the system right after. But things didn't stay peaceful for long. A group of demons ambushed him, and while he managed to fend them off, the last demon self-destructing caught him totally off guard. Luckily, he wasn't hurt. As we continued where we left off, Lin activated a teleportation scroll and soon found himself back in the familiar small courtyard. The cozy smell of tea filled the air, and there sat Meng Anwen alone by the table. Lin greeted him respectfully, and he nodded, telling Lin to wait a bit and that his teacher would be back soon. The scene then shifts to the heroic halls, where White Divine and Old Mo had spent the last couple of months keeping an eye on the situation. Seeing that Lin had left the eternal trial grounds, White Divine decided it was time to head back. Old Mo got up too, also curious to meet this dear student of his old pal. With a hearty laugh, White Divine said he couldn't wait to see our boy once again. Moments later, they teleported back to the small courtyard. Lin greeted his teacher as soon as they appeared, but his eyes soon landed on the unicorn standing next to the elderly man. Lin respectfully greeted Old Mo, recognizing he must have been the legendary divine summoner from the human race, and also Mo Han's grandfather. When White Divine noticed Lin had already reached level 35, he seemed very satisfied. Old Mo, on the other hand, was a little surprised and asked how Lin recognized him. Lin replied that he and Mo Han looked alike, and besides, there weren't many summoners from the human race who'd be traveling with his teacher. Old Mo chuckled, praising Lin's sharp eyes, but couldn't help sizing him up. A level 35 Necromancer? To him, that was just an unusual profession. But what made White Divine think so highly of this kid? The group sat down, and White Divine asked Lin to share what he experienced in the eternal trial grounds. Lin began recounting his journey, sticking to the main events and skipping over the small details. He talked about fighting the soul-devouring insect king, and then taking down the soul-devouring insect queen right after. He also mentioned how he unexpectedly obtained the primordial rune and later defeated the earth dragon god. Hearing this, the two old pals froze mid-sentence, staring at Lin in shock before jumping to their feet. Both of them thought they must have misheard, so they asked him again if he actually managed to defeat them. Lin, staying calm, just nodded. The two exchanged wide-eyed looks, and the place then fell into a stunned silence. Then, out of nowhere, Meng Anwen burst into laughter, causing the two to look a bit embarrassed. He couldn't help but remind them how, back in the day, they led a whole group to fight the soul-devouring insect queen, only to get their ass kicked by the insect king before they even caught sight of her. In the end, they decided to go for the earth dragon god instead, but they barely survived its poison. The memory of their younger, humiliating selves made Meng Anwen laugh even harder. White Divine snorted and said there was no need to bring up ancient history, brushing it off as something not worth mentioning. Old Mo, feeling a bit awkward, thought Meng Anwen was going a little overboard by rubbing salt in their wound. They quickly shifted their attention back to Lin, asking him to continue his story. Lin went on, explaining how he later encountered Mo Han, and the two of them later fused their primordial rune. But things weren't smooth sailing. Afterward, they faced an attack from demons, and then entered the Divine Selection secret realm. There, they both obtained divinity. In the end, when he finished recounting everything, the group was left speechless. None of them could believe that in just 2 short months, Lin had gone through so much. Even for them, old-timers, who were already standing at the absolute peak, Lin's experiences still sounded genuinely terrifying. To top it off, Lin took out the heart of the earth and the earth gem and laid them on the table. Meng Anwen stroked his beard thoughtfully, saying that with these, there's a good chance to have the human race produce a new Earth Knight. White Divine thought the same, and remarked how it had been many, many years since he had seen an Earth Knight. Meng Anwen stored the items in his storage space and told Lin that his contributions this time had been a huge service to the human race, and he would be rewarded hefty. But Lin humbly said it was all just his duty. Lin then pulled out the Dragon King's token, explaining how this item would allow entry into a dungeon called Dragon King Hall. Hoping to get some insider information, he turned to White Divine. But before his teacher could respond, Meng Anwen interjected, bluntly saying that Lin's teacher wouldn't be able to help him, simply because White Divine had never even stepped foot into the Dragon King Hall in the first place. Lin glanced at the two old pals bickering, then smiled and casually placed the remaining dragon crystals on the table. As the crystals piled up, all 3 of them stood up in shock. When Lin explained that he got most of these from demons and dragons, the three of them finally noticed Lin was already a one-star colonel. The realization hit them hard because to increase a single star in the colonel rank, one needed 1,000,000 military merits. This caused them to wonder just how many enemies had our boy taken down in such a short time. Old Mo, on the other hand, finally understood why his old pal held Lin in such high regard. A young man at level 35 who was also a one-star colonel? That had never happened before in history. Heck, they never even heard of people achieving this even by level 45. Old Mo turned around, pretending to be unimpressed, and announced he was leaving. White Divine reminded him that Lin hadn't finished his report yet, but Old Mo wasn't interested in hearing more praises for someone else's student. He turned and left, saying he was more interested in checking on his granddaughter. After seeing him leave, White Divine's expression grew serious. Now that it was just the three of them, he told Lin to speak more freely. At the same time, he wanted to know just how much divinity Lin had gained. Lin hesitated, thinking back to the cauldron he encountered there. But for now, he decided not to mention it. Instead, he casually stated that his divinity level had reached 30. Only 3 levels? White Divine picked up his teacup with a slightly disappointed look. But then, as Lin's words registered, his entire body jolted upright. He stood up while telling Lin to repeat what he just said. Lin repeated, calm as ever replied 30 levels. At this, Meng Anwen burst into laughter. It was revealed that White Divine himself had only managed to gain 5 levels of divinity, but this was already the highest record among the human race. Lin scratched the back of his head and cautiously added, actually, it's now at 35 levels. The place fell silent. While it was unheard of for divinity to increase with level-ups, they had to admit that with Lin, nothing seemed impossible anymore. Holding his forehead, White Divine waved a hand and told Lin to go rest for now. He needed some time to process everything. After Lin left, Meng Anwen sipped his tea and teased White Divine, asking if he was feeling defeated. White Divine shook his head and said, no, not at all. A student surpassing their teacher is the greatest joy I could ask for. But his tone betrayed a hint of concern, as he admitted that with Lin already so powerful, he wasn't sure how to train him further. Meng Anwen casually suggested it's simple, just have Lin walk the same path as White Divine once did and see if he could go even further. White Divine stared at him, his voice dropping as he asked, you mean to let him? The sentence was cut off as the scene returned to Lin. Lin didn't return the rest. Instead, he used the teleportation array to head straight to the first fortress in Yuan battlefield. At the training grounds, he decided to spend some time leveling up his skills. After a long grind, he managed to get his venomous ring to level 35. At the same time, with his current contribution points, he realized he now had enough to join the Creators Academy. He thought about the future and how he could finally fight alongside his sister. Just as he was deep in thought, a teleportation array appeared, and a military order popped up in front of everyone. It was a Class 1 military order, assigning professionals of different levels to different fortresses. Those below level 40 must assist the assigned fortress and stay at the back line. But Lin decided to go for the one meant for those between levels 40 and 60 and headed toward fortress number 6. As he was about to step into the teleportation array, someone stopped him believing his level was too low. Without saying a word, Lin took out his badge. When the man saw that Lin was a 1-star colonel, he immediately saluted and allowed Lin to pass. The moment Lin stepped into the teleportation array, it only took a few seconds before he arrived at fortress number 6. The fortress was bustling with activity. Professionals were gathered everywhere, and the air was filled with hurried commands and shouting. At the highest platform, a demon watch eye was already activated, scanning the surroundings. Standing there was the commander, a level 63, 3-star colonel. He belonged to the Ni family, though he wasn't the same Legion commander Lin had encountered before. Beside the commander stood a level 53 formation master. He asked the commander if they had any intel on which demon lord's forces they were dealing with. The commander shook his head, saying there was no information yet. The old man sighed, remarking that this time the situation might be a little tricky. However, he assured the commander that he had taken control of the fortress's formations and told him not to worry. Lin walked up to the pair. Initially, they assumed he had walked into the wrong place. However, they quickly noticed his badge. But the kid was so young, and only level 35. The old man's eyes lit up as he recognized Lin. He had seen Lin back when he was in charge of the school's class transfer ceremony. It hadn't even been that long, and yet Lin's growth was astonishing. The old man couldn't help but marvel at how ridiculously fast Lin had leveled up. The commander was stunned. This meant Lin had only undergone class transfer for less than a year. How could someone possibly rise to the rank of one-star colonel in such a short time? The old man stroked his long beard, chuckling, and explained, "This kid isn't ordinary. He's also this year's national scholar." Realization struck the commander. He remembered hearing that the human race had produced the youngest lieutenant in history not long ago. Could it be this very guy? The old man simply smiled, commenting that with the war underway, he was looking forward to seeing the surprises Lin would bring. By now, the human professionals had finished gathering. The commander, in a commanding voice, invited everyone into a legion. Aside from himself as the legion commander, the two vice commanders were the formation master, and, surprisingly, Lin, too. The commander's voice boomed across the field, informing everyone that all military merits earned during the battle would be pooled and distributed based on contributions afterward. He also reminded them that within the Legion, they don't have to worry about friendly fire, but cowardice or retreat during combat would be met with severe punishment. The gathered professionals couldn't help but notice one of the vice commanders, standing there at level 35. Some mocked him, saying he was just there to get himself killed. Others sneered, assuming he must have connections and was only here to leech military merits. However, there were a few in the crowd who recognized him. They whispered that this was the guy who broke the challenge match record during the professional competition. Though back then, he had only been level 27. The voices of doubt quieted somewhat. But in this crowd, actions spoke louder than mere reputations. Lin would have to prove himself on the battlefield. The air on the battlefield grew heavy with tension. Lin turned his gaze to the horizon, sensing a familiar aura, not from abyssal demons, but from dragons. In the distance, dark clouds rolled in like an ominous storm. The dragons, fully armed, had already gathered and were charging toward them. The old man immediately recognized this was the Dragonkin Legion. He couldn't believe it. 1,000 years ago, the dragons had been driven out of the Yuan battlefield and they already returned. The Legion commander, however, showed no fear. For him, whether it was dragons or demons, all were enemies to be crushed. As the dragon army advanced, a massive siege warship loomed behind them. The dragons roared loudly, their morale clearly high. In response, the commander activated a buff skill that boosted the stats of everyone. Everyone quickly formed tight battle lines while support units in the rear stacked additional buffs onto everyone. Lin remained calm, quietly thinking, "Looks like someone's here to deliver more military merits." The old man raised a finger, activating the fortress's grand formation. A surge of powerful energy shot out from above the fortress, aiming directly at the enemy. However, the warship quickly retaliated, firing its own counterattack. The two energy collided mid-air, but neither side gained the upper hand. Undeterred, he pushed the fortress formation even further. This time, terrifying energy surged from the fortress, unleashing countless lightning bolts that rained down on the warship. However, the warship deployed a protective barrier, shielding everyone within. Shockingly, the barrier absorbed the energy from the lightning, bolstering the warship's energy even further. However, the old man didn't seem concerned, casually remarked, "Let them gorge themselves for now. Once they start attacking, that's our opportunity." Sure enough, moments later, a beam of energy fired from the warship, aiming directly at the fortress. But instead of hitting its target, the attack struck an invisible barrier. The old man's eyes gleamed as the formation of runes around him lit up one after another, pulsating with energy. In the next instant, an even more powerful bolt of lightning shot out. It streaked across the sky, crackling with destructive force, and slammed directly into the warship's protective barrier. Not only shattering it in the process, it also managed to destroy the massive crystal too.